What's up, guys? My name is Richard. Today, I wanted to talk about when is the best time to enter and exit a liquidity pool. Here's a quick portfolio update before we dive in. I'm sitting on some pretty nice Ethereum profit on my open positions, roughly 10.25 ETH right now, and I'm averaging roughly 40 to 50% APR on my assets. So doing pretty good, but if you look at my closed positions, I'm still at a net profit, but recently made a pretty bad play here. It's a high risk, high reward situation, so I knew what I was getting into. I haven't fully exited this. I basically rebalanced into another strategy, and we'll see my net profit and loss over the next few months for this one. But overall, still a net profit of roughly 18 ETH. So let's dive right in. So entry and exit is pretty important to understand because a lot of times people make the mistake of entering and exiting the pool, not realizing that they might be at a total net loss in crypto terms, or they're making decisions that are not in line with their goals. And that's the number one thing is, what is your goal? Is your goal to make a US dollar profit now, or are you trying to accumulate a certain crypto like Ethereum or Solana? And the second thing to consider is the asset you're entering with. Like if I'm providing liquidity for stuff like Ethereum and USDC, am I entering the position with USDC, or am I entering the position with Ethereum? And the third major part is the market outlook. The best way to explain this is basically run through a few examples and hopefully it makes sense. So if I'm entering this Ethereum to USDC pool as an example with USDC, I want to first figure out my goal. So my goal is to, for example, make a USDC profit, and I see that Ethereum is trading at a zone of support, then this would actually be a good entry for me. So if I enter here in this range, my bottom range, let's just say I set it to 1200, my upper range is 6,000. I would allow for some room on the downside, but you can see there's much more room for the upside. So I'm buying a lot of ETH at this level. And my market outlook is that Ethereum is going to recover in the next 6 to 12 months. I will suffer some divergence loss in this case, but I'm prioritizing US dollar profit. And basically when Ethereum goes up in price, when it's trading above my entry, then whatever Ethereum I bought in the first place is getting sold into USDC on the way up. And because I entered at this price, whatever price movement above that, I'm gaining a net USDC profit on my original liquidity value. And if I earn 20 to 30% APR on my capital, then whatever I earn in fees is basically an extra profit on top of the gains from divergence loss. So another scenario is if I hold a lot of USDC, I'm trying to accumulate more ETH, and my outlook is that Ethereum might be dropping further. I might set a range of something like this at $2,500 and then drag the bottom range down here, because essentially I'm buying some Ethereum here and then I'm waiting for the price to drop down further to dollar cost average into Ethereum. So that's another scenario. That's also something you could run. For example, when Ethereum was trading at $3,000, you might enter here, right, at $3,000, and then the top range is very small because you don't want to buy that much Ethereum at that price, right? And basically your dollar cost averaging on Ethereum on the way down. So that's just a few examples using USDC in this Ethereum to USDC pool. But let's say I hold a lot of Ethereum. I want to take profit on some of my Ethereum. It doesn't make sense to do that right now, but let's say if we were a few months back, Ethereum was trading near $3,000 to $4,000. So let's say I entered here in December or January with Ethereum. My entry price is $3,500. Top range is, let's say, $5,500. Bottom range, roughly $1,000. Let's say I have 10 Ethereum, right? I'm going to swap a lot of it to USDC and the price drops. I'm going to be at an Ethereum profit when that happens. Let me pull up the Metrics Finance Pro so that you can see like roughly what happens. So with the Pro version, I could go in and change like the USDC or the Ethereum price. So in this case, I'm going to put Ethereum to be 3,500. Like I was saying, minimum price 1,000, max price is 5,500. And let's say I started with 10 Ethereum at a 3,500 Ethereum price. So the US dollar value of the deposit amount is roughly 35,000, right? 3,500 times 10. So in this scenario, you would see that I swapped almost 82% of my Ethereum into USDC. And if we click simulate performance, Ethereum right now is trading roughly at $1,800. You can see here, my liquidity pool would be at a 25,657 dollars worth if I entered with 10 Ethereum, right? And this is how much it would be worth right now. But you can see I've gained almost 9 Ethereum from this price action, and I still have almost $10,000 worth of Ethereum. And if you want to figure out the net Ethereum value of your position, basically take this number and divide it by this Ethereum price. So let's say it's 25,657. We're going to divide by 1,800. So in this scenario, I would have gained almost 4.25 Ethereum. And it's not even counting any of the fees, right? So this is a strategy you could run when Ethereum is trading at a higher price and you believe the price is going to retrace and your goal is to make an Ethereum profit. Again, comes back to the 3 factors we talk about. What is your goal, what you're swapping with, and what's your market outlook. And just keep in mind, right, like our market outlook is not always going to be accurate. Let's say you did that swap up here, but Ethereum pumped further. If you're running this pool, then you should be okay with that because either side could happen. So if you still want Ethereum exposure, then you shouldn't be using all of your Ethereum in this strategy. Another example I want to show is a crypto to crypto example. I'm actually in this pool, Solana to Ethereum on ETH mainnet. So I entered here roughly at 0.06 in February. So pretty good entry, and you can see it's trading above this value. And when it's trading above, again, if my goal is Ethereum profit, which it is in this case, then I can exit whenever I want with an Ethereum profit. If we click back to revert finance here, you can see this position is in nice profit because of what I just talked about. You can see roughly 1.63 ETH worth of profit is from the divergence loss. So this divergence loss could be a good thing, right? If my goal is to accumulate more Ethereum. Pretty nice profit in this pool. So again, if my goal is to accumulate more Ethereum, I entered here at a zone of support, which is pretty good. And right here is trading at a zone of resistance. If I want to lock in my Ethereum profit, and that's a good place to exit. Usually entering like when there's a zone of support and exiting at a zone resistance is a pretty good strategy. But again, you want to make sure that you're factoring in those 3 factors that we talk about, right? It doesn't make sense for you to copy my strategy at all. And this is not financial advice, right? Because it's very personalized to your goal. If my goal was to make a net Solana profit, in this case, I would have lost my Solana because if I swap a lot of Solana down here into Ethereum, now a lot of my other Solana is being converted to more Ethereum. So it doesn't make sense if my goal is to stack more Solana with this pool. Better pair to stack Solana might be Bonk and Sol, for example. So let's say I pull up Bonk on TradingView. I could set the quote asset to be the asset I want. In this case, if you're pairing Bonk with Solana, I'm going to select Solana. You can see Bonk is trading at a zone of support relative to Solana. So if I entered here at the current price, my goal is to make a Solana profit. Then as long as it's trading above this current entry, my original liquidity pool capital is going to be at a net Solana profit. Whatever I earn again in fees is profit on top of that divergence loss. So the way I would personally do it, if I enter here and then my exit might be in this zone up here if I want to lock in that Solana profit. And if you just want to keep accumulating both assets, it's still good to enter at like a zone of support here and just keep your liquidity in the pool. And this works with any asset class, right? Let's say if you're bullish on Radium, you could go to Radium, you pull up the quote currency for Radium and Sol. Again, if you enter here at a zone of support, then you're likely in a positive Solana divergence loss. And as long as that happens, you choose to exit the position into Sol, you're in Sol profit, so you could take that profit anytime you want. But the mistake I see some people do is basically they enter up here with Solana. They want to accumulate Solana, but then they suffered a big negative divergence loss. They might not even know it, right? Because they're comparing against holding. And then when they sell into Solana, they're at a net Solana loss. And let me just show you guys an example of my current position that's kind of still underwater here. So I entered Arrow and ETH back here in January, I think, or February, right at 0.00034. You can see it's still trading below my entry. So I'm at a negative Ethereum divergence loss. But because I've been in the pool for a couple of months, it's actually near break even right now. So if we hop to revert, you could see this position here. So barely down 2.5% on my initial investment, even though the price is roughly down like 10% or more from my original entry. But you can see I don't want to exit this pool into Ethereum because I'm at a negative Ethereum loss if I expect Arrow to perform well against Ethereum in the next couple of months. If I change to holding, this is what a lot of people compare their profit and loss on. Sure, I'm beating like holding by $200 something. So it makes sense for me to be in this pool versus just buying Arrow and Ethereum separately. But at the same time, I don't really want to exit my pool into Ethereum if I believe Arrow is going to do well, right? Because I'm just locking in my Ethereum loss. And when I entered, obviously I didn't expect the price to drop even further. That's why I entered in the first place. But again, this is not a great entry. If you entered down here, obviously it's much better because you're in Ethereum profit right now. But the good exit is probably here near a zone of resistance. So the mistake here is not knowing your goals, what you're trying to accumulate, and which assets you're using as your currency, right? For example, I'm looking at Arrow to ETH chart because I'm providing liquidity for Arrow and ETH. And it makes sense to use ETH as the core asset and look at my profit and loss in terms of Ethereum. And the main takeaway here is that your position is in profit as long as it's trading above your entry in terms of divergence loss. If you look at my Bonk and ETH pool here, you can see the green line is my entry at the 0.06 mark. And again, just trying to hammer this point home. As long as it's trading above my entry, I'm in positive Ethereum divergence loss. If I look here, you see 1 ETH profit and roughly like 90% of that is from divergence loss, right? So I hope that makes sense, guys. If you have questions, feel free to comment down below and I'll try to get back to you. And there are a lot of other videos you should check out if you're interested in yield farming. It's going to help you maximize profit and also avoid a lot of the mistakes I made. Thanks for stopping by and watching this video. I'll catch you guys on the next one.